It was a rainy night, the kind of relentless rain that soaked every empty street of San Francisco. And on that very night, Jessica Collins, a 45-year-old woman, was driving along a deserted road when she suddenly realized she was far from home. Her car ran out of gas at a moment when there was no one around, not a single person in sight. She had never seen this stretch of road before, and now the unfamiliarity and unease made her constantly look around, searching for any sign that she was still safe. In the stillness of the air, Jessica could clearly see each thin stream of rain falling against the windshield, accompanied only by the faint sound of water and the weakening hum of the engine. As she rummaged through her handbag, trying to call for help, she suddenly noticed a black car parked at the corner of the street. The car had no lights on, darkness wrapped around it, with only a dim glow from a street lamp casting over it, making it appear even more indistinct. A strange feeling crept over her. She could not explain why, but something in the night air made her tense. Before she could think further, the black car suddenly began moving toward her. Jessica held her phone, fumbling with the numbers and telling herself she had to call for assistance. But then, the driver of the black car stopped beside her, opened the door, and slowly said, "Do you need help?" His voice was low and warm, yet unusual, filled with patience. Jessica looked up at the man inside the car. There was nothing particularly remarkable about him. He looked like an ordinary person, with a composed appearance and a rather calm gaze. A middle-aged man, around 50, his face slightly weary but carrying a sense of trust. He looked at Jessica as if he had known her for a long time, as if he had been watching her through these dark streets. She hesitated for a moment, but then felt something undeniably safe in that gaze. "My car ran out of gas," Jessica said, her voice slightly trembling. "I don't know what to do." The driver did not say anything more. He simply replied gently, "Let me take you home if you don't mind." Jessica stared at him for a moment, then nodded, having no other choice. She stepped into the car, closed the door, and felt the cold air from outside rush into the enclosed space. "Thank you," she said, her voice still tinged with worry. The driver only nodded, his eyes still focused on the road ahead. The space between them felt like a layer of fog, neither of them wanting to break the silence. Time inside the car seemed to slow down. Jessica felt tense, yet at the same time, there was a strange sense that she was in a safe place, at least compared to the world outside. "What do you do for a living?" Jessica asked, breaking the silence. "I drive," he replied briefly, his hands steady on the wheel. Jessica did not ask anything more, the uneasiness still lingering. She thought about her life, a woman past 40, who once had a small, happy family, now left with nothing but loneliness beneath dim streetlights. Her recent divorce had completely turned her life upside down, and now she was alone through long, dragging evenings, through lonely nights with no one by her side. She did not think she would meet someone like Aaron, this driver, a man with nothing remarkable, yet carrying a strange presence that kept her from stopping thinking about him. Then, the car suddenly slowed as it approached Jessica's neighborhood. She looked out the window and saw darkness surrounding her home. "Thank you for bringing me back," she said, her voice softer now. However, before Jessica could step out of the car, Aaron spoke again. "Do you live here alone?" he asked, his voice unhurried. Jessica paused, looking at him as a flicker of confusion crossed her mind. She did not understand why that question was asked, but she answered simply, as if to push away the discomfort. "Yes, I live alone." Aaron said nothing more. He just nodded, then quietly drove away. Jessica stood there, watching the black car disappear into the rainy night. She could not explain why, but the image of that driver lingered in her mind. A strange feeling surrounded her, as if he knew something she did not. And perhaps that was the very moment when everything began to change. Jessica returned to her quiet routine after that night. Every morning, she still woke up in her small apartment in a peaceful neighborhood, a place where she once shared everything with her late husband. The home now felt like a shadow, silent and dim, filled with memories that no one remained to share. She continued her work at the legal consulting firm, where complicated files and endless meetings helped her forget the loneliness that filled her long evenings. But every night, at that same hour, when the watch on her wrist pointed to 11:45, she felt something indescribable, an emptiness she had grown used to over the past several months. And then, as if it had become a new habit, she would pick up her phone, book a ride, and sit there waiting. When Aaron's black car appeared, that quiet space returned once again. He always arrived on time, without unnecessary greetings, just a slight nod and a brief question, "How are you?" Even though they had only recently met, his presence made Jessica feel more at ease. It was not the unease or tension of dealing with a familiar driver, but rather a sense of calm in a busy and unfamiliar world. Their short conversations about work, about life, about simple things gradually became something she could not do without as night fell. A few days later, Aaron came to pick her up again. But this time, Jessica felt something different. She could not explain it, but she noticed a gentler kind of attentiveness in him, something she had never seen in strangers. Whenever she spoke about a long day, he did not just listen. He paid attention to the smallest details, the tone of her voice, even at times the rhythm of her breathing. Sometimes he remained silent, saying nothing at all. Yet Jessica felt a strange connection between them, a connection not everyone could understand. It was not because Aaron was particularly wise, but because he knew how to be silent at the right moment. That night, as Aaron drove Jessica through the dark streets of the city, a sudden rain began to fall, tapping softly against the windshield. Jessica looked out the window, watching the small droplets slide down the glass like unspoken thoughts. She felt as if she were drifting in that space, caught between the past and a present she could not hold on to. She remained silent, sitting across from Aaron, waiting for a question, or perhaps just a small word of comfort. But he simply kept driving, his eyes fixed on the road. That feeling suddenly brought her relief, as if the silence between them was enough to replace all unnecessary words. "Thank you," Jessica said softly. "Thank you for helping me every night. I don't know what else to say." Aaron gave a faint smile, but said nothing. He shook his head slightly, a very small gesture, as if to say there was nothing to thank him for. "I'm just doing my job," he replied. Yet in his eyes there was something Jessica could not understand, a strange calmness. With every encounter, she felt that same unusual comfort more deeply. But tonight, in a night filled with rain and darkness, Jessica began to realize that this sense of peace was not simply about silence or brief conversations. Erin's attentiveness was gradually weaving itself into her habits, into parts of her life she had always tried to avoid. He began to notice her smallest routines. The nights she worked late, the moments she stared at her phone without saying a word, or the times she quickly turned away whenever her past was mentioned. Erin was not someone who knew a lot about her, yet he understood her in a way she could not explain. One day when the rain had stopped, the car once again brought Jessica home. She looked out the window, saw the familiar street ahead, and suddenly felt that something within her had changed. Perhaps she had grown used to Erin's presence in her life, like an inseparable part of those endless nights. The loneliness she once felt had begun to fade, at least a little. "Do you have a family?" Jessica asked, not quite sure why she wanted to know. She had never asked about his personal life before, but tonight, curiosity suddenly surfaced. Aaron did not answer immediately. He remained silent, his gaze fixed outside. Finally, he let out a soft sigh and said, "There was someone, but I can no longer take care of her. Now I'm alone." Jessica did not know what to say. The answer was nothing extraordinary, yet it made something inside her settle. The feeling was gentle and deep, like a whisper in the night. They did not need to say much. Just being there, quietly listening to one another was enough. But what Jessica did not realize, time passed, and Jessica's life slowly returned to the rhythm she had grown used to. Work at the firm was still busy, files still piled high on her desk, but everything felt lighter now that she had her evenings to look forward to. Each night, as darkness fell, Jessica would open her phone, book a ride, and sit waiting. Those evenings were no longer dull as they once were. She no longer felt alone in that cold apartment, because whenever Aaron's car appeared, a part of her felt safe. And just like that, Aaron became a part of Jessica's life, even though neither of them ever said it out loud. They were not friends, nor were they close in any defined way, but his presence filled a space that Jessica could not deny. On the nights she came home late, on the nights she felt exhausted and lonely, Aaron was always there, a stranger in the long evenings, yet a strange comfort she could not refuse. One evening, when Aaron's car stopped in front of Jessica's house, she sensed that something was not right. It was only a vague feeling, something she could not explain, but there was something different in Aaron's gaze that night. He looked at her longer than usual, his eyes slightly tired, yet as if he were thinking about something. Jessica felt that something in the air was changing, but she did not know what to do with that feeling. She thought perhaps she was just being overly sensitive, yet the silence between them made it impossible to ignore. "Do you notice anything strange?" Aaron finally asked, his voice low, as if trying to remain calm. Jessica was surprised, unsure of what he meant. She shook her head and looked out the window, where the streets remained as quiet as ever. "Strange how?" she asked, trying to keep her tone steady. "Something feels different. That's just how it seems to me," Aaron said, without explaining further. He did not look at her, his focus fixed on the road ahead. Jessica did not respond. She simply sat there in silence, a strange confusion rising within her. She did not know why she felt this way. Maybe it was the stress from work, maybe it was the loneliness of long nights. But when she looked at Aaron, she realized he was doing something she had never noticed before. He was observing. Every gesture she made, every small change in her habits, he noticed them all. And sometimes, the things he said felt as if he had seen a deeper part of her that even she had not recognized. A few days later, Aaron picked Jessica up after a late shift. This time, the silence in the car was no longer comforting. Instead, it felt heavy, as if something were hanging in the air. Jessica sensed it, even though she could not be certain. The small talk about work and the usual polite questions they exchanged now lacked the natural ease they once had. It felt as though everything had changed overnight, even though neither of them had said anything. During the drive, Aaron slowed down several times at familiar intersections, his gaze more focused on the cars parked along the curb, on the figures moving through the darkness. Each time, Jessica felt that he was paying attention to something she could not see. She wondered whether he was simply someone who worried too much, or if something was truly wrong. "Do you see that car?" Aaron suddenly asked as they passed a small corner. Jessica followed his gaze and saw a black sedan parked not far away, but she did not find anything unusual about it. "Probably just someone passing through," she said, trying to shake off the discomfort. But Aaron did not agree. "No, I've seen that car several times. It's not a coincidence." Jessica said nothing more, but inside her, a strange feeling began to rise, a sense that everything normal in her life was starting to feel off. She did not understand why, but what Aaron said, and the way he noticed every small detail, made her uneasy. The next day, Jessica began to notice small changes in her life. She saw that same black car parked somewhere near her home one evening, and then again on another day. Not everyone would notice these things, but Aaron seemed to have recognized it long ago. He always knew when she might come home late. He noticed the smallest details in her life without offering any explanation. The sense of safety she once had was now shifting, not because Aaron had done anything strange, but because she realized he knew more than she had ever thought. "Are you carrying anything home?" Aaron asked the next day as they were on their way back. Jessica was surprised. It was a simple question, yet it made her feel uneasy. She had not brought anything important home from work, but the way Aaron looked at her made her think twice. "No," she replied, her voice unfamiliar even to herself. "Everything's fine." Aaron nodded and said nothing more. But Jessica could sense the concern in him, not about her, but about something neither of them fully understood yet. From that moment on, everything was no longer the same. The quiet evenings, the brief conversations between them, suddenly felt different. And Jessica, Even as she tried not to, Jessica could not deny that the nights had become different since Aaron entered her life. Although her work remained as demanding as ever, with endless files and long meetings, each evening, when she sat in Aaron's car, she felt as if she had found a small sense of peace. Never before had she felt someone pay attention to her the way Aaron did. His attentiveness was neither overwhelming nor intrusive, yet it made her think. They were small details she had never noticed in her daily life, like how he always knew exactly which nights she would come home late, or how he mentioned the habits she repeated without realizing. Each time, Jessica felt as if she were being watched, even though no one ever said it outright. Tonight, when Aaron's car stopped in front of her house, she noticed his gaze was different again. It was not the usual attentiveness, but something closer to concern, as if he were seeing something she could not. She tried to avoid that gaze, but deep down, she knew he was noticing things she had never paid attention to. "Have you noticed anything strange?" Aaron asked, his voice more serious than usual. Jessica looked up, following his gaze toward a car parked nearby. A silver gray sedan with tinted windows sat at the corner of the street. She looked at it for a moment, then shook her head. "Probably just someone passing through, Aaron." Aaron did not respond right away. He continued staring at the car. "Have you seen this car before?" Jessica felt something shift inside her, a sense that she might have overlooked something important. She had seen that car, but had not paid much attention. Cars like that were not uncommon in this city. She let out a quiet sigh. "Maybe you're just paying too much attention," she said, though her voice carried a hint of effort. "That's not it," Aaron replied, still calm. "I'm not joking. Have you looked closely? This car has shown up here several times." Jessica fell silent, confused by the weight of his words. She looked at the car again, but this time it did not feel the same as before. Something was off, even though she could not point to what. A sense of unease she could not explain began to rise. When Aaron started driving, he did not mention the car again, yet the silence between them only made the atmosphere more tense. Although they continued their usual small conversations about work and life, Jessica could not stop thinking about what Aaron had said. He was not someone who worried easily, but this time he seemed genuinely concerned about something. A week later, one evening when Aaron picked Jessica up, she felt that something was very wrong. Today, he did not ask about her work like he usually did. No greeting, no casual conversation, only a serious look and an unexpected question. "Have you noticed any strangers?" Jessica looked at him, surprised, sensing that something had shifted between them. "What strangers?" Aaron did not answer immediately, his eyes fixed on the road. "There's a man who has appeared in front of your house several times," he said in a low voice. "He stands there, just looking at your house." Jessica sat still, suddenly feeling a chill run down her spine. She had seen that man once. The image returned to her mind. A middle-aged man, expressionless, standing quietly under a streetlight. She had thought he was just someone passing by, but now Aaron's words made her reconsider. "He was looking at my house?" Jessica whispered, her voice trembling slightly. Aaron nodded. "Yes, and I feel like he's been watching you." Jessica felt her heart begin to race. The feeling was strange, something she could not describe. She had grown used to living alone, but now, hearing Aaron say these things, everything suddenly felt different. Had she been too careless? Had she ignored signs without realizing it? "I don't think he means anything," Jessica said carefully. "Maybe he's just someone passing through." Aaron disagreed. "Are you sure? If I were you, I'd be more careful." Jessica fell silent. She did not know what to say. Aaron's words echoed in her mind, unsettling her thoughts. Every step in her life now felt as if it were being watched. The habits that once seemed ordinary now carried a sense of unease. The small details Aaron had noticed all became frightening, even though they were things she had never thought about before. That night, after Aaron dropped her off, Jessica stood still in front of her door, staring into the darkness surrounding her home. Was someone really watching her? Had things become dangerous in a way she could not see? The worry clung to her like a shadow she could not shake off. That night, Jessica locked her door twice. She looked out the window, hoping to find some sign of something, but everything remained silent. Jessica could not stop thinking about what Aaron had said that night. His words felt like a warning, echoing in her mind every time she tried to calm herself. She had once believed her life would remain steady. Just like the days before, everything began to feel different. But since Aaron appeared, everything had suddenly changed. And now, looking back, Jessica started to notice the strange signs she had once ignored. In the days that followed, she no longer felt as at ease as before. Every night when Aaron's black car picked her up, she felt an indescribable tension. She tried not to think too much about those signs, but something in the air always made her uneasy. It felt as though something was lurking, something she could not clearly see. On a rainy night, when Aaron's car stopped in front of her house, Jessica noticed a clear change in his eyes. It was not the concern she had seen before, but a sense of determination, something stronger. She knew that this time, he was no longer just warning her, he was protecting her. "Aaron, can you just tell me directly?" Jessica asked, her voice no longer calm. "Is something happening that I don't know about?" Aaron paused for a moment, his gaze resting on her face as if deciding whether to say more. Finally, he let out a quiet sigh and spoke, his voice low but firm. "I saw that man again. Today, he wasn't just standing in front of your house. He was waiting for you to leave." Jessica felt a chill run down her spine. Just hearing about that man made her heart beat faster. She had tried to convince herself that everything was just her imagination, but now, hearing this, nothing felt simple anymore. Did he do anything?" Jessica asked, her voice dry as if she could no longer speak normally. Aaron shook his head, but the concern in his eyes could not be hidden. "No, but I feel like something is wrong. I've started paying attention and keeping an eye on him. I think he's been watching you for a long time." A cold sensation seemed to wrap around Jessica. She could not understand why she was being watched, could not understand why anyone would pay attention to her ordinary life. But the more she thought about it, the clearer it became that she could not ignore Aaron's words. He had a reason to be concerned. He had been noticing things she had failed to see. "You mean he's been watching me for a long time?" Jessica asked, trying to stay calm, but her mind was in turmoil. Aaron nodded, his eyes still fixed on hers. "I've seen the signs. That car has been parked there for days. He's not just watching you. He knows your habits." Jessica felt her heart sink. What Aaron was saying now felt like pieces of a puzzle she had never noticed. The cars parked silently in front of her house, the strangers she had ignored, now reappeared in her mind as signs she had overlooked. And now she was facing it. Had she been too careless? Had she trusted too much in the simplicity of her life without realizing that danger had been lingering around her? "What do you think about him?" Jessica asked, her voice soft but filled with worry. "He's not normal," Aaron replied firmly. "There's something in the way he looks at you, in the way he stands there. I think he's already planned something." Jessica shivered. She did not want to think about it, but Aaron's words carried a weight she could not deny. The signs she had once ignored were now clear warnings. That man was not just a stranger. He had a purpose, and Jessica was his target. "So what should I do now?" Jessica asked, unsure how to react. Aaron remained silent for a moment, as if considering her question. Finally, he spoke. "We can't let this continue. You need to report it to the police." Jessica felt a cold wave rise in her chest. She had never imagined she would have to face something like this. Everything suddenly felt too real, too dangerous. She had lived in freedom, in the simplicity of days without worry, but now everything had changed. She could no longer just sit and wait. "But he hasn't done anything yet," Jessica protested, even though she knew she could not keep living in fear forever. "Not yet," Aaron replied, "but I feel like he will act soon. And if you're not careful, everything will go out of control." Jessica said nothing. She just looked out the window. The streets that once felt safe now seemed unfamiliar, filled with dangers she could not recognize. This feeling was something she had never experienced before, but this time she could not ignore it. From that night on, Jessica was no longer just a lonely woman in the long nights. She was a target, and danger was silently watching her from the darkness. She needed to act, but would it still be in time? The feeling of unease would not let Jessica go. Every night, as she sat in Aaron's car, anxious thoughts kept circling in her mind. Even though she did not want to admit it, something had changed. It was not only the small details Aaron had noticed, but also the feeling that someone was quietly watching her every move. She could not understand why, but the warnings Aaron had given were becoming clearer than ever. Tonight, when Aaron's black car stopped in front of her house once again, Jessica felt that something was truly wrong. Even though he had helped her countless times, now, every time she saw him, her uneasiness only grew. There was something in his eyes that would not let her feel at ease. But this time, when Aaron turned to look at her, it was no longer the concern she had seen before. There was something resolute in his gaze, something that made it impossible for Jessica to remain indifferent. "Aaron, can you just tell me directly? Why are you looking at me like that?" Jessica asked, unable to hide the restlessness in her voice. Aaron sighed, his hands still on the wheel, not looking at her. He paused for a moment, as if weighing whether he should continue. Finally, he looked up, his gaze sharper than ever. "I saw him again," Aaron said, his voice lowering. "But this time, it's not just a simple appearance anymore." Jessica looked at him, feeling as though everything was becoming clearer, yet at the same time as vague as a nightmare. Her heart began to race, a fear she could not shake. Everything that had happened now turned into a tangled mess, filled with doubts and unanswered questions. What was he doing? Jessica asked, even though she could already sense the answer. Still, the truth was not fully clear to her, and part of her did not want to believe it. Aaron did not reply immediately. He simply stared ahead in silence. The darkness covered every corner, and that stillness only made the heaviness in Jessica's chest grow stronger. She looked out the window, seeing the dim streetlights and the passing shadows of people. Everything was as it always had been, yet now, those familiar things felt distant, as if they were hiding something she could not see. "When I drove through your neighborhood today, I saw his car again, but this time it was parked closer, right in front of your house," Aaron continued, his voice steady, without fear, yet Jessica could still feel the tension in his words. He wasn't just standing there. He was carefully observing everything, from your windows to your movements every time you came home. A long silence fell between them. Jessica did not know what to say. She had once thought everything was just a misunderstanding, but now, every word from Aaron struck her like a heavy blow. She had believed she was living in a safe world, but now that world had been shattered, and danger seemed to be lurking at every corner, every street. "Do you remember him?" Aaron asked, his voice softer, though the concern remained. "He's the man who stood there, looking into your house without moving. I think he's waiting for you." Jessica suddenly remembered, the image of that man returning to her mind. A middle-aged man, empty eyes, an emotionless stare. She recalled the strange feeling she had when she saw him standing there, but she had tried to ignore it. She had not wanted to think too much about it, but now, all those signs seemed to point in one direction. "He's watching me," Jessica said, her voice dry, as if she were forcing herself to face something she did not want to accept. Aaron nodded, his expression more serious than ever. "And I think he's been paying attention to you for a long time." Jessica's feelings now could not be put into words. Every night when she returned home, the small details like a car parked somewhere she barely noticed, or the shadow of a stranger under a streetlight, all of it had been overlooked in her indifference. But now, as everything was laid out in Aaron's words, it all became clear. She was not just a lonely woman. She was a target of a danger that was getting closer. "What does he want from me?" Jessica asked, her hands clenching together, unsure how to face this reality. "Maybe he doesn't just want to watch you," Aaron said, his voice firmer. "He has a clear intention, and if you're not careful, you'll be the one who pays the price." Jessica did not know how to react. Aaron's words hit her hard. She had not been prepared for this. She only wanted a quiet life. She only wanted everything to go back to how it was. But now, her life had completely changed, and she had no choice but to face the truth. Jessica could not escape the tension that had surrounded her throughout the entire week after that conversation. Every time Aaron's car picked her up, she felt something heavy in the air, as if every passing moment could bring something unexpected and dangerous. She had followed Aaron's advice, but she could not deny that her mind was far from at ease. What he had said about that strange man, the one who had been watching her all this time, now lingered in her thoughts like a shadow she could not drive away. She had considered going to the police, but every time the thought crossed her mind, an invisible fear held her back. What could the police really do when she could not prove anything clearly? Would they even believe her when all she had were uneasy feelings and fears that could not be shown through clear actions or evidence? Those thoughts made Jessica feel more alone than ever, as if she had been pushed into a battle with no one standing on her side. On a rainy evening, Aaron's car stopped in front of her house once again. But this time, when Jessica saw him through the window, she realized his eyes were completely different. It was not the concern she had seen before, but a firm, determined look, something serious, as if he had come not only to drive her home, but to deliver something important. "Can you step outside for a moment?" Aaron asked, his voice no longer gentle but decisive. Jessica looked at him, unease rising in her chest. She stayed silent for a moment, then stepped out of the car. Tonight, the rain was pouring heavily, but the tension in the air made her forget the cold drops falling onto her hair and shoulders. Aaron stood there, looking at her with careful intensity. "What is it, Aaron?" Jessica asked, her voice anxious, unsure of what she was about to face. "Have you noticed anything unusual this week?" Aaron began, his tone more serious than ever. "I've been watching that man again, and today, I'm certain he's planning something." Jessica felt a chill run down her spine, even under the cold rain. She did not know what to say, only that everything seemed to be spinning, and every second felt closer to an unpredictable danger. "He's been getting closer to your area. Not just standing outside anymore. I think he knows exactly what time you come home," Aaron continued, his voice firm yet filled with concern. "He's not hiding anymore. He's looking for a chance to approach you." Jessica felt as if an invisible hand was tightening around her heart. She looked at Aaron, his eyes sharp, yet filled with a fear he could not hide. "What does he want?" she asked, her voice trembling despite her effort to stay calm. Aaron shook his head, as if he did not want to jump to conclusions too soon, but he could not hide his worry. "I don't know, but I think he's been watching you for a long time. And if you don't act now, you won't be safe anymore." The tension in the air grew heavier. The rain fell harder, and around them there was only the sound of rainfall and their heavy breathing. Jessica did not know what to do. She did not want to create more trouble, but Aaron's words rang like an alarm in her mind. Perhaps she had ignored too many signs, and now the danger had come closer than ever. "He's getting closer, but I still haven't seen anything truly dangerous," Jessica said, though her words could not hide the fear in her eyes. "It's not that you don't see it, Jessica," Aaron replied, his voice losing patience. "You can't keep living like this. I know you're afraid, but if you don't face the truth, nothing will change." Jessica felt an invisible pressure weighing down on her. She looked down, unable to meet Aaron's eyes. The confusion, the fear, mixed with hesitation inside her, made it impossible to decide what to do. She had spent so long being independent, handling everything on her own, but now that real danger had arrived, she found herself unable to overcome her own fear. "What do you want me to do?" she asked softly, her voice carrying a vulnerability she had never shown Aaron before. Aaron did not answer immediately. He simply stood there watching her for a moment. Then he made a decision without hesitation. "We're going to the police. We can't wait any longer. If you don't want something bad to happen, you have to act." Jessica looked at him, her heart aching as she heard those words. She felt as if she was standing at a crossroads, between continuing to live in fear and facing a danger she had never imagined. "I don't even know where to begin," Jessica whispered, her hands clenched tightly, unable to find any sense of calm. "What can the police do without clear evidence?" Aaron looked straight into her eyes, his gaze unwavering. "We'll bring everything into the light, and I won't let you face this alone. We can't wait any longer." At that moment, Jessica understood there was no turning back. She had to face the truth, no matter how terrifying it was. And if she did not act now, everything might become too late. Jessica could not sleep. After the conversation with Aaron, the questions in her mind kept circling, relentless and overwhelming, like a storm that could not be calmed. She had believed she was living in peace, but now, every step, every sound inside her home carried a strange feeling, as if someone was watching her every second. She tried to convince herself that it was all just anxiety, but deep down, she knew it was not that simple. The signs had become too clear, and she could no longer ignore them. The next morning, when Jessica stepped outside to begin a new day, she once again felt something different. Everything looked the same, yet now all her senses were sharper than ever. The cars parked along the sidewalk, the people walking by, everything became something that made her uneasy, as if anyone could be part of an unseen danger. When Aaron picked her up that evening, his expression had not softened. He looked at her, but his gaze was no longer gentle. It was filled with determination and concern. Jessica did not ask him anything, because she knew things had gone too far to turn back. "Have you thought about what I said?" Aaron asked as the car began moving along the dark road. Jessica did not answer immediately. She looked out the window, where streetlights flickered and traffic flowed as it did every night. Everything was still the same, but inside her, everything had changed. Every night, when Aaron came to pick her up, she felt a little fear and a little anxiety. But now, that feeling was no longer just about being watched. It had become something inseparable from her life. "Where are we going?" Jessica asked, her voice lower than usual. Aaron did not respond right away. He kept driving, glancing into the rearview mirror as if checking whether someone was following them. Finally, he spoke. "We're going to see the police." Jessica let out a quiet breath. She knew this was necessary, but she could not shake the unease inside her. What could the police do without concrete evidence? She could explain all the feelings she could not describe, but would they believe her? "Are you sure?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Absolutely," Aaron replied, his voice firm with determination. "We can't keep living in fear like this. You need to speak up about what's happening, and we have to bring everything into the light." Even though she did not want to admit it, Jessica understood that Aaron was right. She could not let fear consume her any longer. Her safety and her life could not continue to be threatened without action. What Aaron had said about the strange man and the surveillance was no longer just a vague threat. It was a reality she could not deny. Aaron's car continued moving through empty streets, tall buildings gradually giving way to quieter areas with fewer people. The surroundings felt like a still painting, but inside Jessica, everything was different. She felt as if she was standing at a crossroads, between facing the truth and an unspoken fear. Every time she saw the traffic lights ahead, a tension rose within her, as if something was getting closer. When the car finally stopped in front of the police station, Jessica felt as though she had stepped into a completely different world. Everything here carried a sense of seriousness, from the bricks of the building to the patrol cars parked outside. But what frightened her most was the invisible shadow, the one she knew was waiting for her just beyond those doors. Aaron opened the car door and stepped out, then turned back to look at her. He did not say anything, only gestured for her to come out. Jessica hesitated for a moment, then stepped down. She did not want to, but she had no choice. She had to face this, no matter how overwhelming her fear was. As they walked inside the police station, the atmosphere grew heavier. The smell of disinfectant and brewed coffee in the meeting room made Jessica feel like she could barely breathe. She and Aaron sat down at a cold table. A police officer approached and began taking notes. The questions he asked were not easy to answer. She had to recount everything that had happened over time, from her encounters with Aaron, the strange details she had noticed, to the fears and the feeling of being watched. When Jessica spoke about the strange man Aaron had warned her about, the officer did not seem... Jessica sat in silence in the interrogation room, her hands gripping her handbag tightly, her eyes unable to leave the cold surface of the table in front of her. The air in the room felt dim and heavy. The smell of disinfectant mixed with coffee left an unpleasant taste in her mouth. She could not imagine that she would have to sit here, recounting all the strange details of her life over the past period. Every word, every question from the police officer felt like a sharp blade. digging deeper into the fears she had tried to hide. The police were not in a hurry. They questioned her carefully, as if trying to gather every piece of a tangled story that Jessica had not even realized she was living in. She spoke about the unease she had experienced, about the long nights when she felt someone was watching her, about the unfamiliar parked cars and the figures standing under streetlights. Each time she told it, the details became clearer, and she began to feel as if she herself had been deceived. "Can you remember the name of that man?" the officer asked, his voice not as gentle as Jessica had expected. Jessica shook her head, feeling as though she was losing control. "No, I don't know his name. I only know that I've seen him many times, standing under the streetlight, looking at my house. I don't understand why he does that, but I'm sure he's been watching me." The officer quickly wrote in his notebook, saying nothing more, but Jessica could see the doubt in his eyes. She understood why. What she was describing sounded like madness, yet it was a truth she could not deny. Every night, she felt the presence of someone lurking around her. After Jessica finished telling everything she could remember, the officer stood up and walked out. The room became quieter and colder than ever. Jessica sat there alone, feeling as if the entire room was spinning around her. She did not know what to do next, did not know whether she was strong enough to face the truth. Just the thought of confronting that strange man made her heart pound uncontrollably. After a while, the officer returned, and this time he was not alone. A middle-aged man, who appeared to be a detective, entered the room with him. The detective looked at Jessica closely, his gaze sharp, as if trying to read her thoughts. He sat down across from her, gave a slight nod, and began to speak. "We have confirmed a few details you just provided," he said, his voice low and steady yet firm. "The man you described is named Victor Hale. He has a rather complicated past, and we are currently investigating him in a similar case." Jessica looked up, unable to believe what she had just heard. "Victor Hale? How could he?" She could not finish her sentence, confusion tightening her throat. The detective did not let her dwell on it. "He is a former security employee at several large companies, but he was dismissed after multiple reports of inappropriate behavior. We have been monitoring him for a long time, but he always finds ways to avoid us. Recently, he appeared in your area, and we began to notice signs we could no longer ignore." Jessica felt as if a heavy weight was pressing down on her chest. The image of that man, the times she had seen him standing under the streetlight, now turned into a real danger she could no longer dismiss. "So what does he want from me?" she asked, her voice no longer calm, filled with panic. The detective sighed and frowned slightly. "We can't say for certain, but there is one thing we do know. He is not watching you randomly. He has his reasons, and we need your help to understand his motives." Jessica looked straight into the detective's eyes, her heart tightening with fear. "I don't know anything about him. I haven't done anything wrong. Why am I being watched?" "We will find out," the detective said seriously. "We are investigating, and we will catch him soon. But in the meantime, you need to be more careful. He knows your habits. You must inform us immediately if you notice anything suspicious." Jessica nodded, though the anxiety remained. She felt as if she had stepped into an entirely different world, where shadows from the past suddenly emerged, threatening the peaceful life she once believed she had. She did not know if she was strong enough to face all of this, but she knew one thing for certain: she could not continue living in fear forever. After leaving the interrogation room, Jessica felt as though a part of her had shattered. The police knew about Victor Hale, and that meant the danger was no longer just her imagination. Everything had become an undeniable reality. She could no longer avoid it. She had to stand up and face it, no matter how difficult it might be. What Jessica did not know was that her life would never return to what it once was. Everything now had become a fight for survival between her and the unseen danger hiding in the darkness. After the tense session at the police station, Jessica could not stop thinking about everything that had happened. The new information about Victor Hale, the details she could not fully understand, had now become crucial pieces in a story she could no longer escape. Although she felt some relief knowing the police were involved, her fear of what might come next only grew stronger. She could not imagine facing that man again, especially knowing he had been watching her for so long, knowing her every habit. This unshakable unease followed her every time she returned home. In the days that followed, Jessica tried to live normally. She went to work, completed her tasks, spoke with colleagues, but she could not focus on anything. Everything around her felt blurred, leaving only one thought in her mind: Victor Hale and the danger he posed. Even though she knew she could not live in fear forever, the feeling clung to her, refusing to let go. That evening, after a long day at work, when Erin's car picked her up as usual, she felt waves of anxiety rising again. But tonight, something was different. It was not the same tension as before, but a clear determination in Erin's eyes. He was no longer just a driver, a stranger who helped her every night. He had become a companion in a fight against a danger she could not face alone. "How are you feeling?" Erin asked as the car began to move, his voice gentle but serious. Jessica looked out the window, unable to hide the anxiety surrounding her. "I don't know. Everything? It feels like it's getting worse," she said, her voice hoarse with exhaustion. "I feel like I'm trapped in a nightmare I can't wake up from." Aaron glanced at her through the rearview mirror, his eyes quietly observing. "We can't keep living in fear, Jessica. The police have information about Victor Hale, and he's no longer hiding. We have to face him." His words struck her like a heavy blow. She did not know if she had the strength to face the truth. Every night she returned home in fear, and now that everything had become clear, she felt as if she had no choice but to confront the danger. They drove to a deserted area where an abandoned warehouse stood, a place the police had confirmed Victor Hale might be hiding. Jessica felt her heart pounding as the car stopped in front of the large warehouse door. The surroundings were dim and silent, making her feel as though she was stepping into a battle she could not escape. Aaron stepped out of the car first, then turned to look at her, his eyes filled with determination. "You're coming with me," he said, not as a request, but as a statement. "We need to make sure he can't keep threatening you." Jessica nodded, even as overwhelming fear rose inside her. She could not imagine facing Victor Hale, a man she could not understand. But now, every path led to only one choice: facing the truth. They stepped into the warehouse, their footsteps echoing in the silence, accompanied only by their heavy breathing and the sound of bricks beneath their feet. Each step felt like a test, as if they were moving closer to something both of them feared. The dim beam from Aaron's flashlight illuminated only a small part of the space. Everything around them felt blurred and unclear, yet Jessica sensed that something was waiting ahead. Suddenly, a sound came from a dark corner of the warehouse. A door creaked softly. Jessica and Aaron stopped, their eyes meeting, and Jessica felt her body stiffen. This was the moment they would have to face what she could never have imagined. Aaron moved forward, his hand gripping a small gun in his pocket, ready for anything. Jessica followed closely behind, her heart filled with dread. Each step she took seemed to stretch the tension in the air even further. Then a figure emerged from the darkness, and Jessica recognized him immediately: Victor Hale. He stood silently, his eyes emotionless yet filled with anger. He looked at both of them, showing no fear or concern, only a sense of challenge. "So you finally came," Victor said, his voice cold as ice. "Do you really think you can stop me?" Jessica felt fear rise within her, but she did not let it take control. She could not allow herself to be overwhelmed again. "Why?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady, even as her heart pounded in her chest. "Why me?" Victor let out a quiet laugh, filled with mockery. "Because you are the only one who can ruin my plan, and I can't let that happen." She did not know what to do next, but one thing she knew for certain was that everything she had once feared was now standing right in front of her. And the only way to regain control was to face it. After the tense moments inside the dark warehouse, when the police arrived and Victor Hale was arrested, Jessica still could not fully breathe a sigh of relief. Even though the officers had acted quickly, capturing him and bringing him under control, the anxiety inside her did not fade. Images of him still lingered in her mind, every cold stare, every threatening word making her heart race uncontrollably. Now, standing in the reality that she was safe, Jessica still could not understand herself. She had gone through things she had never imagined before: the surveillance, the threats, and the feeling of being unable to escape the watchful eyes of a stranger. All of it had now been removed, yet the unease remained, as if it had become an inseparable part of her new life. Jessica stepped into her home after the police left. She closed the door. The light inside the apartment was the same as always, but the space around her felt unfamiliar, as if it was no longer the place she had lived in for years. Everything was the same, yet not anymore. Everything seemed to have changed, even if only slightly. That lingering fear, though temporarily pushed away, was still present in every step she took. A few days later, Jessica returned to the office, resuming her work with the files and documents she had avoided over the past weeks. But as she looked at the stack of papers, she no longer felt the same. Everything seemed blurred, as if she herself had changed and was no longer the same person. She was no longer alone, no longer the woman overwhelmed by unease. Yet she still could not fully regain a sense of safety. What surprised Jessica was the change within herself. She no longer felt lonely as before, yet she could not forget what had happened. She began to realize that nothing in life could remain the same forever, and she could not live in fear indefinitely. She had to face what had happened and learn to live with those memories, because no matter what, they had become a part of her life. The police continued their investigation into Victor Hale and uncovered important evidence in the cases he was connected to. They discovered that he had not acted alone, but had been working with a group of people with dark intentions, manipulating legal cases, and this made Jessica realize how precious the sense of peace in her work truly was. She continued working at the legal consulting firm, where each day she handled complex case files. But now her work was no longer just work. It had become part of facing her past, part of her journey to regain peace. One weekend after work, Aaron came to pick Jessica up as usual. But this time, something had changed between them. There was no longer the tension she once felt. Instead, there was calmness, a sense of ease as she sat beside him during their long drives. They did not talk much, just simple conversations, sometimes about work, sometimes about life. And in those moments, Jessica began to feel that she was no longer the woman exhausted by fear. She had learned how to keep living without being haunted by the past. "Do you feel better?" Aaron asked one evening as he drove her home. Jessica looked up into his eyes. "Much better," she replied with a gentle smile. "I think I'm ready to start again." Her answer was not just a simple response. It was an acknowledgement that she was no longer the woman she used to be. She had overcome a difficult chapter in her life, and although the past still lingered somewhere, she was ready for a new beginning, a chapter without the shadow of fear, only peace and hope. In the evenings that followed, Jessica no longer felt unfamiliar returning to her small home. She began to notice again the things she had once forgotten: the smell of coffee in the air, the glow of the desk lamp by the window, the soft sound of wind passing through the door. Those simple details now gave her a sense of safety, as if she had regained some control over her life. Aaron continued driving in the evenings, and although each ride lasted only about 15 minutes, every conversation with him made Jessica feel as though she was reconnecting with what truly mattered in life. She was no longer a woman running from her past, but someone who could face it, accept it, and move forward. A week later, when Aaron drove her home, he stopped the car and turned to look at her. "Would you like to go out for dinner this weekend?" he asked, for the first time in weeks, not just about her work or her safety. Jessica smiled, feeling warmth spread through her. "I'd love that," she replied, sensing that she had rediscovered a part of herself that had long been lost. The difficult days no longer weighed her down. She had moved past them and continued forward. And in the days that followed, each time she stepped outside and breathed in the fresh air, Jessica felt as though she was living a completely new life. A life where she was free to take control, no longer overshadowed by fear. As time passed, Jessica began to feel the changes within herself. The long nights were no longer something that haunted her. They had become moments where she could truly feel peace, She no longer saw frightening shadows passing by her window or heard the small noises that once made her heart jump. Everything around her seemed to return to what it once was, but not in the way she had expected. She had changed, and her life was no longer the same as before. Work at the company continued, the files, the meetings, and the constant deadlines were still there. But Jessica no longer felt the same pressure. She began to find joy in small things, like seeing a colleague smile, or the feeling of a Monday morning that no longer filled her with dread when she stepped into the office. Those ordinary things now brought her a sense of happiness and peace she had never truly noticed before. Every evening, when Aaron's car came to pick her up, Jessica felt that she now had a real friend. It was not about worry or encouragement, but about his presence, the quiet listening and understanding they shared. Aaron was no longer just a driver. He had become a companion on her journey. They did not need to say much. Just sitting together, feeling safe in silence was enough. Those rides were no longer routine. They became moments where they understood each other more deeply. Not through words, but through shared silence. One evening, when the car stopped in front of her house, Jessica suddenly spoke. "Do you think there's something we can do next, Aaron?" Aaron stopped the car and looked at her through the rearview mirror. "What do you mean?" Jessica stayed quiet for a moment, feeling everything within her. "I don't want to keep living in fear. I don't want my past to control me anymore. But I also can't forget what happened. Do you think I can truly start over?" Aaron looked at her, his eyes filled with understanding. "I think you've already done something remarkable, Jessica. You've made it through everything, and now you can move forward into a new life. But I understand it's not easy. We all need time to become ourselves again." His words felt like reassurance, like encouragement Jessica had never expected. She looked into his eyes and felt a warmth she had never known before. She realized she was no longer alone. Everything was slowly changing, not because of what had happened, but because she had chosen to change. The next evening, when Jessica returned home, she stood at the door and looked at her apartment. Everything was the same, but this time, she did not feel afraid. She opened the door, stepped inside, and for the first time in many months, she did not feel the cold emptiness of loneliness, but the warmth of being welcomed by her own home. The feeling was strange and refreshing, as if she had stepped into a new space, one she had created for herself. In the days that followed, Jessica began to change her habits. She started taking better care of herself, not just for work, but for her own well-being. Every morning, she woke up earlier to exercise, feeling the strength of her body after months of tension. She spent time cooking for herself, trying new recipes she had never considered before. In the evenings, she read books, enjoyed new stories, and sometimes simply sat alone, looking out the window at the star-filled night sky. A week later, on an early morning while Jessica was exercising in the park near her home, she ran into an old friend, Sarah. They had not been in contact for a long time, and Jessica felt a bit surprised to see her. Sarah smiled and greeted her, and almost immediately, they began talking as if no time had passed. "What have you been doing? You look so much healthier and happier," Sarah said, her eyes full of surprise. Jessica smiled softly, feeling joy rise from within. "I'm learning how to live again. I went through a difficult time, but now I feel like things are slowly settling." Jessica looked out the window, the streetlights casting long streaks of reflection across the glass. A sense of peace had returned, yet it felt almost unfamiliar, almost too good to believe. The days of anxiety, fear, and sleepless nights had now become part of the past. Like a nightmare, she no longer wished to remember. She no longer felt that overwhelming dread each time she returned home. Instead, there was a strange sense of safety, a calm she had never truly known before. And yet, a part of her still could not forget what had happened. Those long days, the constant worry about Victor Hale and the unseen dangers still lingered in her thoughts. What she had gone through had not only changed her life, it had changed the way she saw everything around her. She had learned that sometimes safety does not come from avoiding danger, but from facing it and finding a way through. Jessica knew that it was Aaron's attention, his quiet care, that had given her the strength to step out of that darkness. Without him, she might have remained trapped in fear forever. Because of him, she had found herself again. And now, even though everything was over, even though Victor Hale had been captured, she could not ignore the feeling that she had discovered something greater than just safety. The conversations she had with Aaron, the moments they sat in silence in the car, saying nothing, simply listening to each other, had taught her something important. She realized that the truth is not always clear. It is not always something you can see right away. And sometimes, silence and listening are the only ways to truly understand what is happening. She had also learned that in life, we cannot exist just to survive. Sometimes, we have to face difficulties, face challenges, and move through them. Every step, every choice leads us toward a future we cannot predict. And it is those choices, whether big or small, that shape who we become. Jessica looked down at the phone in her hand. There was a message from Aaron. He had invited her to dinner this weekend, a way to mark the end of a long and difficult chapter. She smiled and replied. Even though everything had settled, she knew that with Aaron beside her, she would never have to face anything alone again. "We are not weak, Jessica," Aaron had once told her, and those words still echoed in her mind. And it was true. They were not weak. Everyone carries a hidden strength that not everyone recognizes. And when we find people who are willing to stand beside us, we can overcome anything. Jessica took a deep breath, feeling the calm within her. She had overcome so much. She had refused to let herself be defeated. And now, looking back, she felt proud of herself, not only for what she had done, but for how she had grown, for everything she had learned along the way. She began to understand that life is not always easy, but it is always worth living. There will be times when you face difficulties, pain that you cannot avoid, but what matters is that you can rise after each fall, that you can see those challenges as lessons, as opportunities to grow. And most importantly, you do not have to face it all alone. Jessica opened the window, letting the cool night air flow inside. She felt lighter than ever. She had walked a long road, and now she was free to live her life without being overshadowed by fear. That was the freedom she had found, not by avoiding danger, but by facing it and overcoming it. She understood that life is not always simple. Each of us must face our own fears and challenges, but we have the power to choose how we respond to them. Sometimes, all it takes is a little courage, a little patience, and determination to get through. And most importantly, when you are no longer afraid, when you live with confidence, life becomes far more beautiful. She looked back at her phone and quickly replied to Aaron's message. "I'm really looking forward to it. Thank you for always being there for me." A warmth spread through her chest. Jessica knew that no matter how life changed, she would never be alone. The challenges she had faced were only part of a much larger journey she was still walking. She would never forget that when we dare to face hardship, we find strength within ourselves and in those around us. Always remember, change begins from within you. And with those thoughts, Jessica felt at peace. A new life had opened before her, and she knew she would live it fully, with nothing left to fear. Thank you for following Jessica's journey. Her story is not only about fear and danger, but also a lesson in resilience, inner strength, and the power to transform one's own life. Sometimes the challenges we face teach us how to confront difficulties and overcome them with greater strength. If you found this story meaningful, don't hesitate to share it with others around you. Remember that everyone has the ability to change their life, as long as they have the belief and courage to walk that path. And if you are going through a difficult time, don't forget that support from those around you, along with your own inner strength, can be a powerful source of motivation to overcome anything. Leave your thoughts in the comments below this video, share your own story, or simply like and follow so you don't miss more inspiring stories to come. Life can always change, and you are the one who makes the difference. Thank you for being here.